employed. We're prepared to look at something like that to incorporate into this new concept. The area, I know some of you probably look at the labor statistics more than I do, but recently in the state of Maine, I found out that statewide there are somewhat 40,000 jobs that are going unfilled because of unskilled labor. And that's a shame because we do have institutions in the state, both at the secondary and post-secondary level, that can help address those issues. The problem is that, quite frankly, we don't know exactly how well to do that. And I think having the input from you folks will give us a good idea on how to design the curriculum, especially on the CTE side of the house, and how we'll better prepare our students for employment. The other concept that we talked about, and Kevin mentioned it today, is we're kind of in the middle of nowhere in terms of campus connections, and that's what they're talking about next door. But we want to create a facility that's kind of one-stop shopping for not only the students that go through there 9 through 16, but also the community members that maybe never had a chance to go to college, and now there's one right in their neighborhood, and they can get any kind of education that they wanted to through that facility. But primarily, we want to create a hub, if you will, for future employees, for businesses that are in our general area, and get those students prepared enough to start work upon graduation from high school. And if they go on, they can have the same opportunity that those high school graduates would have. So that kind of frames things out. Anything you want to add to that, Matt?
I think the only additional part that I would add to it is a part that was really important to the committee in the design of this program and this facility would be the understanding that, like right now, we are preparing kids for jobs that don't yet exist in a lot of ways. But we also are looking in terms of being a facility that's going to help solve community problems, help solve business-related problems. So we're going to have a design hub as part of the program, as part of the facility, to bring that in, to say, like, if we see down the road that you are experiencing a different kind of challenge that was unanticipated, but you need some support in, we have a place here to bring in industry, educational folks to be able to say, how might we all design a solution, and then be a part working it together through our educational center, our training center, a facility like that. There's a great opportunity to really connect the businesses and the communities and the school in one intentional design. I use the word intention a lot.
Just to kind of get your thought process going, I envision, for example, in this facility, a space that could be multi-utilized from all the businesses and industries in our general area for training purposes. And I use Cork a lot because I've talked to Larry, who used to be a Cork guy. And when they have technician training, when a new automobile comes out, for example, the technicians have to go off and get trained to be not only up to speed with their certification, but to get the latest technology and know how to fix them. Typically what will happen, correct me if I'm wrong, but typically what will happen is the employer will maybe get 4 or 5 guys and say, okay, you guys are going to Detroit for a week to get the training. So in doing that, they made a commitment to send those employees to get training, but they've lost 5 employees, they've lost hours, and they've lost, money basically. What if we had a facility, for example, that would allow people like Cork to come here, do their training, not only do their training locally, they'll be able to have their people work during the day, come to training at night, and students here can participate in terms of watching and learning. And that goes for any kind of organization in our general area. Have this as an area to come to be training versus go out of state to do maybe 4 or 5 days worth of training. The benefit for us there would be the kids would be exposed to that kind of training, and they'd see firsthand the kinds of things that they need to get up on to be successful if they get employed by a certain company. The benefit to you would be, again, it's local, and Doug, I hate to put you on the spot, but you went to Massachusetts to see a few schools that actually were doing things like that, and maybe you could just describe a couple of those.
We went to 3 schools. I went to all 3 because really believe in vocational education, and when you talk to the general public in this area, the public supports us. The public believes in vocational education, and they want us doing more of it. And the state will reimburse us at a much higher rate for vocational education currently than they will for academic. In other words, this vocational school gets a bigger percentage of their total funding from the state than the school across the street. That to me was important. But the attitude that we saw was unbelievable. Those kids were there for a purpose. They weren't drifting. They weren't there to put their time in. It was the way you would want an American high school to look. You saw people. You could detect it in their walk, in their demeanor, and when you started to look at the courses that were being offered, you could see why. The automotive shop in one school in particular was better than almost was as good as some of the shops in Bangor, some of the dealerships in Bangor. And those kids were hands-on learning things. And how many of our kids today aren't like the kids that grew up on a farm that knew they could do things? It builds confidence in kids to try things, and until our youngsters get that confidence to try things and actually do it, then I think we're missing an opportunity. So I really was impressed with those schools. I think that we're going to have an awful challenge to organize our schools the way those schools were organized out there, because all those kids were there because they wanted to be there. And I think that's the key to an education, and I think that we need to go through an application process, and I think the kids in this area who want to go to this school should have that opportunity. I don't think it should be determined by somebody in Augusta that you live in this area, so you're going to this school, because I think that will change the attitude. I think that we need to be able to, if a student in this area wants to go to Foxcroft Academy for whatever reasons, they're going to find a way to go anyway. So that's going to be a real hurdle, but it's something that I've spent a lot of time. It scares some of these school administrators. But you see the schools in Massachusetts, and if you ever get the opportunity, go online, look at the comprehensive high schools in Massachusetts. There are 27 of them, and they're working well.
This, I hope, to meld into what you just said. But when you talk about the people that are untrained, let's make sure the school doesn't confuse unskilled labor with lack of employability. Okay, there are some people that don't know how to work, and you have to mix that in there. You've got to arouse a passion, and you've got to take somebody aside and say, look, it doesn't matter how much you know, you're not going to get hired anywhere. So there's going to be an employability factor. You saw the people with the passion. Somehow that passion was aroused. They were working on new stuff, but they weeded out the ones that nobody would ever hire. So that has to be addressed somehow. The other thing that comes to my mind is the one campus design. I don't know if I was lucky enough or poor enough to grow up in Newburgh in the 50s, but I went to one-room schools. The multi-room school opened when I was in the tail end of my 8th grade. The beauty of that was, as I look back, there were 4 grades in one classroom, and the 4th grade was listening to 8th grade stuff. If you were sharp, you were always listening to stuff that was advanced, rather than sit there. And I think some of that concept could be employed in this one campus design. If you've got some time, rather than sit in study hall, go look down on the people that are working on cars and see if a spark isn't lit that arouses a passion, because passion is what gets people driving trucks, forming lumber, or creating buildings, or running cranes, building bridges. It somehow takes a passion.
I would have to echo that for healthcare. I mean, if somebody's not passionate about working with patients, I don't want them taking care of patients. And really having those right people in those right jobs. And it does make a difference. And I like what you mentioned, having that opportunity to be able to, have a sophomore be able to, maybe even audit college classes or those kind of things, and be able to look at some different opportunities. I think it's innovative design that we've seen so far. Some of the clusters I questioned because they were just a little bit, for me, jumbled in some of the things that I work in healthcare. I just felt like I was picking out of a lot of different categories. And just understanding, how it's going to work. We know what we're short on now, and we can guess what we're going to be short on in 5 years. And we have a pretty good idea. We know we're getting foreign-born people to fill jobs today at the hospital. That's just happening, and it's going to happen more. We'd rather not do that. We'd rather be hiring from our community and have local people take care of local people. So it's trying to figure out those pieces. Some of the classes and courses that are down here are PhD courses, which if you're not in that program in a school, and if we're not in an organization that, like physical therapy is a doctorate program to get a PhD, so you might be able to get a start in it, but some of the schools don't accept you unless you've taken their program. So making sure that these are reasonable and that they'll work, and that we're taking advantage of the other classes that are 2 and 4 year, like lab technicians. We are drowning in need of lab technicians.
On the business resource side for the training, one thing I would encourage is you to speak with some of your partners like Eastern Maine Community College. We've had great success with Mayo Regional. They've also done some training for Puritan Pride and Hardwood Products that we're not duplicating efforts because obviously if we can work smarter instead of harder and not compete against each other, it's going to make us, make this process much more advantageous for our businesses. So instead of being approached by 3 different entities that are all trying to do the same thing, they have one point of contact. Because if you can combine those efforts, then what you can do is you can say, okay, we can fund this. So instead of, Terry having to come in and say, I need help with something, someone's going out to Terry and saying, how can we help you? Or going over to Maria at the hospital saying, how can we help you? So I think, by combining that outreach, you have the ability to go knock on the doors of businesses versus expecting them to come in and identifying that they have an issue.
I think an important part of getting businesses involved, I don't know how this is done, and keep them involved, but I was asked to speak at UTC, the technical high school there on the Hogan Road, and I haven't been in there much and I don't know much about it, but this was in the heavy equipment maintenance end. And what I looked at when I walked into what the engines they were working on, they're 3 generations behind. Okay, they were 1983 Caterpillars and late 80s Cummins. That's not what we're working on now. I mean, the theory is the same, but we don't work on iron anymore. We work on all of this pollution control stuff that's a different mindset, a different value set. So if you outfit one of these schools with modern stuff and it's not upgraded in 10 years, you're going to be working on history pretty soon. That has to be thought into this. I see that done a lot in heavy equipment maintenance courses is we're teaching passé stuff. A lot of the theories don't change. Hydraulics doesn't change from 80s to now. There's more technical stuff, but the theories are the same. But we got to make sure we're fixing what's broken today and not what was broken in 1985.
Part of the thing that we're working on, Pat, and we're working on is that we're 5 years away from opening the doors if we get approved. So what we've talked about is adding a couple courses a year, because if Guilford and Dexter consolidate, then there's going to be some room. So there should be, and we're hoping that this year's legislative session will give us some funding so that we can add 2 courses a year. There's 10 courses here now. We would have the 20 up and running by the time the school opens. So this isn't down the road forever, Steve. And so, and that's why you guys are here. If we've got the wrong career paths down, you need to tell us. If we're not doing the modern stuff that we need to do, that's what this is for. And I'd like to see, some input into, okay, these are the two courses, and Pat can tell you what they're working on now, we've got to get it approved by the state. What are the two next year? And what are the two the year after? And we'll build this over time, and then we're gonna have to change. We may scrap some of the courses that we have.
Yeah, being adaptable is a major important component that we recognize. We know that we need to be able to adapt and to be able to provide our students with the best opportunities that we can provide them with. And things change, technologies change, and we need to make sure that we can modernize, and so that we are constantly looking. Not just one of the downsides of, or one of the problems of education has been we've been stuck in doing the things the exact same way for over 100 years. And if you really look back, not much has actually changed. Technology has changed, but the way that instruction and teaching has gone on, it really hasn't changed that much. So we're really looking here at how might we really do something completely radically different and meeting those needs. So it does mean a certain level of commitment of keeping modernized, keeping updated, staying adaptable.
Well, along those lines, what sort of training would the staff, I mean, this seems like a lot more pressure on the staff to be able to adjust their it's not like I teach 4 classes of algebra every day, and
right.
We teach the same thing every September 17th each year, and I mean, this sounds like a lot of pressure on the staff to continually upgrade their skills and knowledge, maybe work for companies that do what they teach in the summer to make sure they're not the 15-year-old engine. It's the constraint to the students.
Well,
I was going to say, why wouldn't this be allowed to have, like our industry, our company, have some of the best and brightest of our people, someone like a Craig Levy who runs a machine shop over there, to come in and help train people, put some of the new equipment that we've got, some of the electronics, the robotics, to understand here with the new stuff, not the old crap that was built last century, but some of the new stuff. That's what we need. We need repair people who are smart at trying to troubleshoot, which is probably one of the biggest problems we have. The building, as far as machinist and mechanical skills, welding, electronics. I mean, we're always short electronic people. Robotics is computer integrated manufacturing systems for all the geeks that love all the computer controls and all that. It's all there. And then from a lab side, we want to be able to take lab technicians and work in the medical side to help us develop some of the new products, some of the cell collection release. We've got some new patents coming out that are just going to rock the world, and we need people.
Mm-hmm.
We've been on a hiring binge here for about a year. We just can't find the right people, enough people to do what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got 500 people now.
I think that's part of what we need to figure out is how can we get your industry into the building to provide.
We'll send our people, our machines will do what we have to do to have our best people come down and help train. We will commit to that. We'll commit to funding some of the equipment, some of the new product stuff that we do. Why wouldn't we do that? It's to our advantage. We'll have a group. If you can have a group come down and build new equipment and have that installed in our plant and have them work with it and troubleshoot it, we would fund that. You don't need the state to do that.
The school has to find out who wants to be a machinist, who has a passion for it, who likes to see metal being turned. Mm-hmm. If you train the wrong one in the wrong area,
let's just fire them. I mean,
Jerry.
I say that tongue in cheek. we do that. I mean, we hire bozos once in a while, and you boot them.
What do we need to incorporate into this school so you can do that?
Well, we need space. We need the ability to have our own people come down and train. We're willing to take people.
And we need communication back and forth between you and the school.
Absolutely. And from us, a commitment to actually do that and fund it correctly. And to have a commitment of manpower, resources on all shifts. I'm just talking the manufacturing side right now. I'm not even talking administrative where we're just short supervision.
There will be space in this school for you and for
We would
other
love
industry to come, for the
That's
hospital
the
to
intent.
come.
We
That's the
would love
intent.
to have a pilot plant here so
Yeah.
that we could build the new century collection release products that we make, that fund the future. That's on the Puritan side. From the wood side, we got a whole bunch of stuff going on there with all new automation and integration of electronics, robotics.
In a sense, kind of creating an industry pipeline.
Exactly.
Creating a place where you are building,
And-
you're building up the staff to
You bet.
fulfill right into
And we
John, you
would
had something to say
commit, we
too.
would commit to hire the people if they pass the courses
Okay.
and they're qualified. Absolutely.
That's exactly the model
We'll
that.
make that quick.
It's sort of like I don't know what Matt
We
showed
don't want to
earlier,
go
but
to, I don't know, you hear from court, somebody here?
I wouldn't have a long time.
Well, we don't want them going over there. We want
Well, you might have the first, anyhow, that whole model you saw of the progressive certification within the system, the final product we're hoping would be like an internship for you.
Yeah.
Like
We
all
have
of
that
the-
available now. We can't get interns. We've offered that.
But if we have the design of the programs to build towards some of the stuff that you are working on and that you would need, we'd already have that built into our system to provide the pre-skills, the pre-content to be able to do that kind of work already.
Okay.
Provide that human capacity.
We would like people not just to be here, but would like to transport people into our company during the school year, during this whole course of whatever that course is, and say, come into our operation, come into
Sure.
our plant, deal with real life stuff, deal with the material issues, with the people issues. Well, we're trying to avoid that, but make them learn what it's about.
The school does have potential to be a training hub, like you're talking about, a place for people to come in to do training
Do that.
from across.
And it would be good. It would be good for our people like Craig. He gets stale once in a while. He gets bored sitting there. You know, he can't be dreaming about running skidoos up in Canada all the time.
I do want to get back to one of the questions about the staffing, and one of the major components of our application is how are you going to manage and deal with professional development? How are you going to get your staff ready for this program, whatever it looks like, which it's still very nebulous, it's still very up in the air, dreaming kind of ideas. And so part of our plan is that. But one of the things that the Program Integration Committee was very strong about was wanting to make sure that our staff had master's degrees. And over the next number of years, we could support them to get through master's degrees so that they could also teach at the adjunct level in the building and be hired by higher education, to be hired by that, to be able to support a lot of that. It would also possibly be that we work with some of the organizations and businesses to say, how can this teacher who's doing this educator over here is doing this, how can we integrate that in and provide some co-teaching along the way? So there's a lot of different models. We have not narrowed that down yet because we really wanted to hear with our ideas and hear from your voices before we even thought about what is it that the teachers are going to need in their design and build for that.
And that's in phase 3 too.
A lot of that comes in.
It's probably a bigger hurdle than it sounds.
Oh, it's huge.
Because some of the best people I know, from machinists, welders,
They don't have
mechanics,
mass.
and any good
Oh, no.
quality teachers.
No, we're talking about the teachers in the building. The teachers in the building. Not necessarily the students going through getting a master's degree. This is the 9 through 16 building. It doesn't go up beyond, at most, a bachelor's. At the most. And even that, that's going to be tough to pull off.
So, teachers who are going to be in this program to actually intern in our company and actually work.
I would
for
love
us
that.
on site.
That
And
would be great.
we'll even
I love that.
pay them rather than the subsistence wages that the school pays.
I would honestly, I would love for our teachers. That's a great idea. What if our teachers have like a paid sabbatical and come, or not paid, but a sabbatical where they take the year off from teaching and they come and work for you for a year.
Well, I don't know if we want them a year. year, but I mean.
6 months, 3 weeks.
Term.
So what I was going to say is that I think.
And then they'll know what to teach. They'll see it. They'll feel it. They'll
One
read
of the guidances from the Department of Education was that we needed to be thinking outside the box. And that's what you guys are doing. And it's hard for some of us to think in different ways. We do it the way we've always done it, and it's tough.
Right.
So, the educrats, you gotta have a master's degree or a PhD, where you're from industry and you bring somebody in that knows what they're doing and how to do it, and that's rare that you worry about that kind of stuff.
So the educational model, and I'm not an educator, but I work in economic development. The educational model has changed. And you look at the community college, and they're now talking more about stackable certificates versus a 4-year degree. I think there's great benefit in looking at some of the stuff that they're doing out of Eastern Maine Community College. The program with Mayo, they're actually using Mayo staff as the proctors and the as the faculty to work with those students so that they can actually do their learning locally instead of having to drive into Bangor. Eastern Maine Community College, Washington Community College, and Northern Maine Community College just finished, and I actually attended their graduation for a forestry services and products training that they did. The equipment was all donated for the class and was actually sold at the beginning of the class. So it was there for their 8-week period that they had. They had a group of 12 students that graduated with their certificates and were certified on these different pieces of equipment so they could go out and do forestry. So I think much like Terry was saying, where he's saying, we'll donate equipment, we'll buy equipment, you can probably find other situations where you'll get that newer and current equipment in the building. But I think some of this is being done with other organizations, and I would encourage you, and I know that the higher ed group is over there, to talk to the community college, because there's funding that they have through their MPG program to help bring some of these classes and certificates online. And it's usually a partnership. I mean, to what Mayo did and what Terry's talking about, it's that a business is going to come in and say, listen, we have a need for trained professionals to work here at many levels. We will commit X, the community college commits Y, and that's how you get to that critical mass in the trained workforce. So I think the model is changing. The model is changing, from when I went to school, which was everyone needs a 4-year degree. They skipped over the 2-year and went right to 4-year. Well, that doesn't work for everyone.
Right.
And quite honestly, you look at any of our industries like HVAC, automotive, mechanical, we work with the railroad. It's the exact same thing. They're going, okay, where's our next generation of machinists, railroad mechanics, things like that. So I think looking at those stackable certificates and including the community college system would work.
You say stackable certificates, and one of the things that is in our program design that's in the details, we did not mention it out there because it can get way into the weeds really quickly, but it is to create our school and the program built on a system of stackable certifications, also known as micro-credentials, where our staff are able, or our students are able to earn certification or school level and or industry certifications in multiple places, and we can certify that they have abilities over here, knowledge over here. So it does not mean there has to be one necessarily pathway. There will be, the intent is to be flexible with this.
So for that same point, taking one of Terry's machinists who doesn't have a college degree,
correct,
can you find a way to test that individual out with their proficiency so that they can actually be an instructor
exactly
for those students, so that you can certify, John Smith as someone who can actually teach those classes? Because in a lot of cases, some of the folks who have the highest level of talent have never set foot in an education of higher learning.
From being a student perspective, that's easy to do.
From
being a teacher perspective, that's going to be a little bit harder.
And that's the piece that I'm getting to, because
right.
I think you've got a
there
large
are lots
pool
of laws and rules about being a teacher in a school and a building and whatnot that we'll have to jump through. But we also know that DOE has been very, give us what you got, give us your ideas, and we'll see what we can figure out. If
you bring them in as a fellow and have them teaching specific classes, that's your workaround.
Use it in public high school?
I would challenge you to look into it. They've had some interesting models on inner city schools, because that would get you to having the folks because you have got some amazing equipment over there that you guys have designed and built that is not going to be something that is taught
Never
from.
see it online or anywhere else.
Exactly.
But we're not interested in paying any of
Right.
our people. We'll pay them. If it's a matter of money and worried about what the school does, we'll pay the people to come here and train the students.
I mean,
Right, no.
We will do that. We'll
It's a,
give
it's a
you
matter
the-
of jumping through the hoops at
Well,
DOE
and
and
you-
certification, because you have to have certain levels of application, a certain number of things to make sure that are the right way. There's a tremendous amount of hoops you have to jump through. So what we then have to do is figure out. I think this is a great idea. How might we help those folks jump through the hoops, and if possible, how might we use this school to create fewer hoops?
well, and I think
It
if
could be
you're
a course of study at this school.
And there's another element.
This is exactly what we needed to be thinking about.
The governor and his staff are deeply involved in this. And we all know him well enough to know that some of these hoops are gonna come down if he has his way. Some of these education hoops that the department has put up, some of those will go away. That will be part of what goes on in phase 3. Once we get by the second phase, then some of these hoops may be artificial. A master's degree for some courses of instruction may not be practical. Let's take that hoop down if that's what we need to do.
So, as a recovering political, I would say that you should never plan. You should never plan for your current administration. You should be looking at a more holistic approach, because when this school comes online, you're going to be into the tail end of another gubernatorial stint. So, what you want is you want to look at practices that are going to pull from both sides of the aisle with common sense, which is kind of funny to use with politics, but common sense solutions that actually will get you where you need to be, that are industry specific and able to help your workforce, and help your employers. So I think we have to look at things a little more holistically and say, if we were to do this and have all of our wishes come true, what would that look at? Can we use a fellowship program? Can we work with industry partners? How do we find funding for this? Because there are other pieces that become very attractive for foundational funding that allows you to go even further than DOE and takes it out of the political arena. And you look at something that is not going to be, challenged by the next administration coming in, or 10 or 15 years from now. You end up with something that's truly sustainable.
We need to get this locked down so that we know where we're going, and so it's not easy to back out of before the end of this administration. And that's the intent.
You're
That's
also-
why the schedule is the way it is.
Well, no, I'm talking, and I agree with you on that. I'm saying get it locked down, but what I'm saying is, as we look at plan things, you have to plan for the idea that even though an administration may do a rule change right now, a future one may go in a completely different direction. So how do we
Try
find
to
that
make it
middle?
Too expensive for them to do that.
Right. Well,
We're talking at creating machinists and equipment operators and a few things. That doesn't take 4 years or 8 years to learn how to do some of these skills. The basic education takes a long time, a little bit at a time. And we need a little bit of basics to do everything that we do, even driving truck, So I don't know how to separate stuff that needs to be learned versus stuff that you need to focus on to do a specific function. I think you mentioned teaching forestry and forestry machines. That's a good idea, but what I think of there is you haven't weeded out the students. When you've got one taught to run a forestry harvester, now you're telling, we need you in Comstock at 3 o'clock Monday morning. And that's how long to get there? Well, 3.5 hours when the weather's good. And it's pouring rain and it's April. You better find out if that person likes 2 o'clock in the morning and mud first.
So remember too that this whole plan has to integrate the 4 pieces: the industry partnerships, the CTE, the higher education, and the traditional high school, which means that our students, every single student, still has to go through and meet proficiency in English language arts, mathematics, social studies, science, visual performing arts, world languages, health, physical education. They're still going to have to get those traditional expectations. How we get them is really what the program is intended to be innovative on. That it's not just going to be 9th grade English, 10th grade English, 11th grade English. That it's going to be doing the math and the English and the science contextually. One of the biggest problems we have in teaching mathematics in particular, and have had for over 50 years now, is we've taught it out of context. We've taught tricks, ways to quickly solve a problem, but not why we're solving this problem. And that's one of the things that we are working on in schools, starting down at the kindergarten level, retraining our teachers and retraining our curriculum of how to teach mathematics. So part of what we have to do is teach it in context. And it doesn't have to necessarily be in forestry. It could be in something that the students are interested in. For example, we might develop a course on motocross course design. There's a tremendous amount of mathematics and physics involved in that. We might do one on how would you deal with a zombie apocalypse, right? That's not really going to happen, but there's a tremendous amount of community planning. There's a tremendous amount of epidemiology that happens there. So these are the things that these career-oriented clusters are designed to push people through and to get pieces. But we have to then integrate in the CTE. We have to integrate the traditional high school components and weave them in those expectations seamlessly.
Now, just real quick, one thing I wanted to mention, and I asked Larry to address it, but one of the things that we don't have a good grasp on in CTE right now is having internships. For example, somebody brought up the fact you have to weed out kids that are, excited about the program versus not excited about the program. In Larry's case, he had students that were overqualified, right? They were really excelling. And the way we train kids to go to entry level. So in his judgment, these kids were beyond that. So he placed them. I wonder if you could kind of address that whole notion.
I've been trying to take everything in because what I'm hearing is just somebody I knew once said we all have these things in place in CTE, but nobody will put tires on the bus. And that's exactly where we're at right now. And everything the school has talked about is exactly what this building does, but it's not brought to the forefront, and you do know where I'm going with this. My 18 years in the auto industry led to, I've been here for 9 years. My background, my training allows any one of your machinists to walk in here tomorrow and be hired instantly. You don't need a degree, you don't need to go to college, you don't do anything in CT because we have that model in place because that your industry background overrules any 4-year college degree. So that transition is very easy to happen. One of the things that, and Pat said about internships, so we look at this, and right now I work closely with main auto dealers, and our organization has all of these things figured out. We've been doing this for years. We do 6 days a year of instructor training and update, sponsored by GM, Ford, Toyota, whoever we work with. They pay the bill, take us down. It's usually at Central Maine Community College, Eastern Maine Community College. We do that back and forth. Southern Maine. They pay for that. They provide that training. We have a connection to all of my students get 12 credits from Rick Thomas at Eastern Maine Community College. It's all in play. I already have the higher level learning in play. My program is ASC accredited by their division called NATAP. So what I do at the high school level is the exact same thing that Rick does at the community college level for entry level positions. So we have that all overlaid. And we've also mastered the art of internships in the auto industry. But there's a huge obstacle in there. And I hear you about internships, but you got to get the Department of Labor to do something about it. Because we cannot help you until you get the law changed. Can't done.
Sending students into a facility.
Can't do it. You have to be 18 years old in the state. There's absolutely no loophole around it.
Change the spark plug in the law.
Nothing. However, Maine auto dealers did make a change because the state law is you cannot use a lift. And that includes a floor jack. It's considered a lift unless you're 18 years old in the state if you're in a facility that receives payment. So what Maine auto
do it in
dealers
school, but you can do it in a facility.
Well, what Maine auto dealers did, and I think it got pushed through the last session, was if you are in a certified accredited program such as mine is or ours is, that overrules that law and that allows my students to work at Quirks or Barney's or wherever they can do every single thing in the facility that their 10-year technicians do. Main auto dealers took that upon themselves because the auto industry is in such dire need as everyone is. We hear the same thing. So they took it. It has to be done politically before Pat and I can do anything about it for my program. So that's the pathway that the association took care of and got into play. So what I have, last year I had 5 students out working. At, 2 in. Two at Quirks, I had 1 at Barney's in Pittsfield, I had 2 students in independent shops. That law change cleared the way. And we've always done it because my connection to their company, they're relying on me and no one else to tell them, yeah, I think I got a good kid for you. This is Vicky would do for you 2 guys. We got a good kid, can we get him in the door? So they're relying on my experience and my employment with them to handpick that kid. Because I have no control of the kid that comes in my program, absolutely not. And that's your point. Your very valid point. As a matter of fact, that needs to be brought to the top of this school project. So those internships, what that does is my students are all making $10 an hour. They're not coming here. They're receiving full credit in my program. They're receiving all those credits for Eastern Maine Community College, and they're not working every day. My student at Quirks, they ended up buying him $7,500 in Snap-on tools, and they're paying him to be sponsored at Lakes Region Community College, because that's the only GM-only certification school that there is. So he's going out there, he's going to work, he's going to go to school for nothing, and he has a full-time job. They just offered, okay, you work for us for 2 years, that's the carrot on that. And so we have, in the auto industry, we got this all figured out, or we've got enough big chunks in play to make this work. And we've been doing it since 1992. This organization started in 1992. So it isn't like it's new, but it can be pushed back into all other areas. What I don't have is I don't have the connection across the street at the high school. We don't have the education side tied to us. That's our struggle. That's our challenge, I guess you could say, to make that piece happen. But these can be done very, very simply. But your industry has to make Department of Labor is the first stop. If they won't allow you to take a 17-year-old person and work in your store, we can't, Pat and I can do nothing to help you. And you can bring $10 billion into this school. We cannot help you.
And you try to change that law, you're favoring child labor in this.
However, Department of Education, if you approach it as a learning lab and experiential learning and actually certify each of those locations, you might be able to get it to run through DOE, which would allow you to piggyback off of DOL with being able to
skirt. But that means the student stands there and observes. They can't work. So.
No, not if it's a learning lab. Because remember, a learning laboratory, it's no different than doing your biology classes. You've got your book learning, and then you're in a bio lab. The hospitals use the exact same.
Right.
So
we would do the CNA, yes.
That might be your workaround, which allows you to skirt the child labor laws.
So we were able to, this past summer at Chimbro, we brought in a 17-year-old that was an electrical student at UTC, Bangor High School student on UTC. Worked with the DOL, the school, the parents, and we were able to employ that person for the summer. They were able to perform hazardous work as long as it was incidental to the training, and in that there was constant oversight. But it went well. It was a pilot program for us because we usually do that for students right out of school under 18, and we're going to be looking to do that more and more as we go along, trying to get into different disciplines and keep that going because it's so critical to get those students exposure at a young age because a lot of times they're going to find out, oh, this isn't for me anyway, or wow, I love this and I want to learn more. So
we get and I know Matt said this many times, the time restraint has to go away. My students are here, on paper, they're here 350 hours a year.
Mm-hmm.
If we have 6 schools come here, if it rains in Newport and they cancel school, or the wind blows in Milo and they cancel school, my students don't come. So that timeline has to be 100% eliminated. That needs to be top of the list to make sure that we can do that. And that's would be helpful to your situation also because I see kids for 90 days. What the hell am I going to teach them about cars in 90 days?
Another potential benefit of this potential facility is that right now, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but generally speaking, CTE students start at grade 11. What we're able to do then with this facility is be able to start with contextual CTE type programs at grade 9.
Well, you're talking dumb truckers here. I don't know what CTE is, and I don't know what the age is at grade 9. I'd have to go back.
Okay, CTE is career technical education. That's this building. And 9th grade is around 14, 15.
And what Matt's referring to too is it's an integrated approach to building. You're getting your academics, but you're also getting exposure to a number of programs. In fact, the 9th grade would be exposure to, if we have 20 programs, they'd be exposed to 20 of those programs. They'd have to make a decision which program that they would like to, become an expert in, if you will, by the end of their sophomore year. But the beauty of that is you have, and I see it every day here, and I tell my instructors what they're doing. You know what they're doing, but the light bulbs go off when a kid goes into Larry's class and he's doing Ohm's law on his electric boards. All of a sudden, the kid makes a connection. Oh, that's what that's all about. You go into my machinist shop there, and he's doing algebra 2, and the kids right away they say, "Now I understand this," and that's where the integration piece comes in. So they're going to get both sides of the house, if you will, but they'll have a better perspective of how to apply that because of the opportunities they have on the building. And I'm just talking now about high school.
Going back to the internship, why couldn't, and I've had 2 kids at age 15 get a superintendent's signature and get a worker's permit. Why can't they do that internship through the summer at that specific job?
There's a lot of, there's different categories in the child labor. And Larry's right now the magic age is 18. And there is movement afoot because I was just down there about a month ago.
No, but what I'm saying
trying to
is,
change those laws.
my 2 kids have worked at age 15 with a superintendent's signature.
Yeah.
Why couldn't it be done the same way like that?
Different industries, different exposure to danger.
I think the big issue is that there's potential.
Liability.
And part of what we can then do here is we might be able to design into this facility if there are those laws, and let's just say hypothetically we can't get around them. How might we then be able to build into our facility experiences to meet those? How might we build that into our facility here to make those a reality of what you need? How might we do that? And that's where that design center comes into play to be like, this is what we need. How can we get there? And then we make it happen. To be that adaptable, to be that level of flexibility, but also to really provide the kids and you all and the community with the resources and the support that is so desperately needed.
I think, I know I can see the clock, but
yes.
And I know it's talked about the auto industry. They saw their issue, they forced the change, and that'll come, I think that's why you're all here to say, my industry needs this. You have to force the change. It's almost like you got to force the school to change, you got to force the law to change. But it does work, and it's there. We also do 5 industry certifications on my program. We got extra 5 stackable credentials. We're also working with a company on one of those stackable credentials to be the training facility in the state where technicians in the field will come and get their master certification level also. So that's on me. That's because I'm the certified instructor for them certifications, if you will, and I've done that with other schools. So it's all about, and that's why I know that's the question Pat's asking you. What do you want us to do? And it has to be. It's not so much. I think it's this. This is here. It is. This is what you will do. This is how it'll be successful because that's.
Yeah, we don't have those answers yet.
Right.
But we're in the world right now. We're in the entire world of potential. That's where we are, and so.
You folks that are here on the front lines every day, if there was some kind of course in, for lack of a better term, employability, how many souls could be saved and turned into the workforce if at an early age they were taught, you'd better straighten this out, you'd better straighten that out, or he's not going to hire you, he's not going to hire you. And if you had an interview training process, and things like that. I'm vague here, but you know what I'm saying. I mean, you get applicants that you turn around very quickly. You can see there's no sense spending any time. But some of those traits would have to be changed early? And would there be benefit to have, of course, home ec was mentioned out there, returning to home ec. I view that as a course in risk management, employability, very, very basic skills.
Just like personal finance. I mean,
Right.
don't get yourself in financial hole
See it all the time.
unnecessarily.
But
And
there's
it's such
one-
a distraction, and it takes away
There's
from the
one
job
element you guys don't
performance.
know, and because of that, and I didn't know it when I was in the industry until I got here. I have students that have been here, and I'm got 2 or 3 right now that when they go home, what the hell are you doing that for? We get a check every month in the mail. You don't have to do anything.
I'd like to say something before we finish that I think we've kind of neglected tonight. You know, the education system in Maine has gotten a black eye over the years for not doing as good a job as people wanted to do. But my kids went through the education system and got, I think, a good education. And the education is here if kids want it. And my dad used to say, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. You can send a kid to school, but you can't make them learn. This will be one more way to inspire some of those kids to want to learn. And if a kid is inspired, if a person wants that job, they'll be there when it starts. But somehow they've got to be inspired to do it. You can't drive them, you can't teach them, you've got to inspire them, and that's what one of the keys, I think, to this whole concept is that kids are going to be able to see the opportunities and that they can actually get somewhere in life.
You know that expression,
Early
time,
exposure, 9th grade. instead of
yeah,
late.
time flies when you're having fun, but it's actually time flies when you're engaged in something. If you're deeply engaged in something, you know, if you're bored in school, you are not engaged.
That
So
was the
how do we
difference.
create engaging?
That was the difference
for
in
all
the students in those schools in Massachusetts. They were inspired.
Yeah, I'd like to respond to the principal to that, because I think that you made 2 comments today that I think are absolutely real. Mr. Pelletier, you're dead on, and I think it's more than 2 or 3 of your students.
It is.
Is that we have a mindset in this vicinity, and I can tell you that it's not healthy, and that there has to be work to be done early to give kids a chance to believe, it's a mindset, that they could actually accomplish something, because they haven't seen that in their families and all that. But I do believe between what Matt said about engagement, what Doug said about getting exposed, and all of these things, that's gonna be a combination, it's not a one thing, it's gonna be everything coming together, and we will help far more kids than we are now. I don't know if everybody, but we'll help far more, and you guys will be on the receiving end of that.
And this is as much about the students as it is about the industry.
To get to the
It has to be about
employability,
the
though,
students.
you're talking about actually getting to those students when they're in kindergarten or younger, and actually start to put some of those things where they can see aspirations, and
When
then
they can
provide
see they can be successful.
exactly. So you're actually talking.
Some of that comes down to accountability.
Right.
They're not accountable in school anymore, because you can do the test over, and you can do it over again.
You can do it 100 times.
And you can pass it in late. And if you don't like what you passed in late, you can pass it in late again and do it over. You can't do that in industry.
That's true.
Well, you can.
But you're fine. I mean, you're gonna have mistakes, things are gonna happen, but you can't rely on that every day.
The beauty of this whole motion is this school will be pretty much owned by the community. And I don't mean just the education piece of it, but the community at large will own this school. Business and industry that partner with us will own this school. And I think the more influence business and industry has on telling kids from the get-go that they have to be responsible, they have to take ownership, that kind of thing. They're gonna hear that all the time, not just from the teachers, but from people that are employing, maybe their parents, and maybe someday them. I mean, we can tell kids, and Larry can test.
I tell kids all day
every
long, you
day.
gotta tighten the lug nuts. If
And
Jack
it's
works in there
like-
and says, you gotta tighten the lug nuts, oh my God, we didn't know we were supposed to do that.
Yeah.
So your presence, just walking through the building and talking to kids, as you guys know, it's huge.
I think a lot of us here would come in anytime we were asked and put on a 20-minute PowerPoint display. I've got several all rigged up to show what each of Bush Ag does. You know, a lot of people don't really know. We haul a little lumber, and we haul a little wood, and we haul a little oil. But, you know, putting a PowerPoint up of all the different things we've done is quite interesting. And, you know, I've done it quite a few times, and it opens some eyes, and I'm sure Bro can do that. I just got a tour of the Sarah Mildred Long Bridge 2 weeks ago down there, you know, it aroused a lot of juices. And Sargent, I spent 6 years with Sargent in the early 70s. I'm sure Jason could put together pictures of building interstates, old and new, that, you know, would really get people interested that like to know what it's like to move dirt on an enormous scale. And those that don't care, go learn how to play the violin or something else. Find your passion. Find your passion is the key. And
Well, I think the trades as a whole do a relatively poor job marketing themselves as well as a career option. You know, I think that's something that
the country's got itself in valuing other things, and now we've got a hole in this end, and we're trying to figure out how to fill it again, because we've valued selling cars over working on them. You know, that we've paid highly for those that would sell us insurance on our trucks, but the truck drivers, we haven't valued that highly until we don't have enough.
You get out and talk to the public, they know that we need to teach kids how to do something. How vocation.
Yeah, thank you. This has been incredibly informative.
Which keyboard?
Um,
The Zag one?
We're gonna take a lot of this feedback, information, and then I
That's the
don't
way
know,
it says.
Kevin
It
will
looks like
be in
they're
contact
portable
with
Mac.
most, I think he wants to do a quick debrief at the
Yeah.
end, but,
What do you have for
Thanks, folks.
The two,
see, you know,
but I've got
we
the,
go from here.
yeah, and I've got the same keyboard I use for my iMac at home. I've got a portable one, yeah, which is great.